Hello, everyone. This is Bill Griffin. Welcome to Different Take Podcast. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share, comment. I really appreciate you watching. We have new episodes Tuesdays and Thursdays. The thing I want to talk about today is the recent, I'm doing this as of May 10th, 2022. About 10 days ago or so, Politico there's a leaked draft by Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito that would indicate that Roe v. Wade is being overturned, and abortion rights advocates and Democrat senators and legislators, their hair's on fire, and there's wailing and gnashing of teeth because Roe v. Wade will be overturned. But this isn't certain because it is a draft. This document was leaked, and since then there have been a lot of protests outside even the Supreme Court justices' homes. Churches have been disrupted, and the Biden administration seems to be perfectly fine with all this. The interesting thing about this media frenzy over the leak is typically these leakers are never found in Washington or never found out. They're never held to account, even though people are saying how awful it is to leak. Of course, the Biden administration is paying lip service, as I said, but typically you don't hear about who did how the leak occurred, who did it, and they're not held account. Leftist media and Democrat politicians are being very misleading because they portray this as a matter where abortion rights will be suspended across the United States, in many states in total. And they present this as some sort of surprise and shock. It shouldn't shock anyone. They don't challenge the logic of this draft opinion, which is, if you go through it, it's pretty unassailable. It's easy to read, and I want to go through some passages in it in another episode. But for now, I kind of want to summarize how I think the media is misleading and Democrat politicians are misleading people, because they present this as Roe v. Wade being overturned destroys an absolute right that women have had, which is not true. Women did not have an absolute right to an abortion, because if they did, the Supreme Court wouldn't allow many of these states to have limited, over many decisions over many years, limit the conditions under which they could have an abortion. This is Senator Kristen Gillibrand of New York. And if you listen to this passage in this video, this was done just a few days ago, there is, if you try substituting the woman's rights for the prenatal life, you'll see that you could do that very easily. And then you'd have to ask yourself, well, which is more moral? At what stage of pregnancy will states allow this? Because states have different laws now. So if you substitute those words, check this video out and see what you think.
It is barbaric. It is inhumane. It is unacceptable. And I hope every human being in this country understands that when you take away a woman's right to make her decisions about her health and well-being, she is no longer a full citizen. She no longer has freedom. She no longer has bodily autonomy. She no longer has basic civil rights.
So if you substitute barbaric, inhuman, unacceptable to talk about abortion, in many places around the world, that's exactly what people think, and their laws reflect that. She says the woman's right not to be a full citizen. She doesn't have freedom, bodily autonomy, civil rights, and civil liberties. Well, you could say that about the unborn child. Abortion rights activists like to use the word fetus instead of unborn child, but many mothers refer to the fetus as their baby. And it's not unusual to do that. What sex is your baby going to be? That's what grandparents ask. These senators in particular, this is a diversion tactic, and also to raise campaign funds, but to divert from the big problems that the country faces with inflation and potential wars and that sort of thing. This is a headline. Amy Klobuchar, senator from Minnesota, says, she says, abortion is a decision between me and my doctor. That is not what Roe v. Wade says. So they're having a vote, and I'll show you in a second what it does say. That is not what it says. And the Senate is going to have a vote, according to Chuck Schumer, on Wednesday, May 11th, on whether to codify Roe versus Wade. If they were really this serious about this, why wouldn't they have done this in 2009 or earlier? Why wouldn't they have done this the first day of the first week of the Biden administration? Why wouldn't they have voted on this? Because they don't believe in what they're saying. This is called complete chaos if this goes through. It's some sort of big shock. Of all people, Ruth Bader Ginsburg did not agree with the Roe versus Wade, that opinion. She did not agree with it. She said she would have preferred the states and the courts to have worked through these issues. But that is not what has happened the last 50 years. And as I said, I'll go through the entire thing in another, well, not the entire thing, but passages through the opinion, another episode. But I want to show you what this says in Wikipedia, of all places, regarding the holding, that the brief summary of what the court held, and I think it was 1972, the Roe versus Wade opinion was, majority opinion was, went through the Supreme Court and became the law of the land. It says the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution provides a fundamental right to privacy that protects a pregnant woman's liberty to choose whether to have an abortion. This right is not absolute and must be balanced against the government's interest in protecting women's health and protecting prenatal life. Texas's statutes making it a crime to procure an abortion violated this right. So they're referring to the case Roe v. Wade, that this, and the key words here is this right is not absolute and must be balanced against the government's interest in protecting women's health and protecting prenatal life. So check this video out from a state house, a Virginia state house legislator, or maybe a senator, I'm not sure, but she is being questioned about an abortion bill that she puts in front of the Virginia legislators.
A physician perform an abortion if he indicated it would impair the mental health of the woman.
Or physical health.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm talking about the mental health.
So, I mean, through the third trimester. The third trimester goes all the way up to 40 weeks.
Okay. But to the end of the third trimester.
Yep, I don't think we have a limit in the bill.
So, where it's obvious that a woman is about to give birth, she has physical signs of that she is about to give a birth, would that still be a point at which she could request an abortion if she was so certified? She's dilating.
Mr. Chairman, that would be a decision that the doctor, the physician, and the woman would make.
I understand
at
that. I'm asking
point.
if your bill allows that.
My bill would allow that, yes.
So you can see she actually looks quite embarrassed to bring this bill up because she's presenting this as an absolute right without any concern for the child, even up until the time of birth. And there's another person there's plenty of people that share this opinion. This is not a person until it is actually born. And this is a problem that many Democrats have, is they don't set limits They don't think about the other side of things. The Roe v. Wade set limits. When politicians start talking about morality, it's kind of scary. That's not really their their bailiwick. And what I mean by that is they constantly talk about things that are hypocrisy. They constantly use the words hypocrisy. This is a video of a person on the Joe Rogan podcast, and they're discussing the topic of abortion with a fellow named Rory, Albanese, Albanese, I guess. This was done in February of 2018. So he's basically talking about the morality and the hypocrisy of a person who is a staunch pro-life protester that...
It's a very complicated thing. Like a life form that will eventually become a person is inside your body. What do you do? Like, you imagine we had to make that decision?
Yeah.
We're lucky that chicks do it because we don't think correctly for that proposition.
Says, well, they're being hypocritical if they don't do these other things and that they don't do them. And let's think about it from another angle. Could you, the Rory fellow, I don't think he could perform the abortion. Could he become the abortionist? A lot of people would have a big moral problem, provided that they had the skills to do so, to perform an abortion. Many doctors do not want to have anything to do with performing abortions, even though they have the skill set to do so. Of course, you could say, well, just because I'm not personally willing to do it, I don't have a problem with someone else doing it. And that's sort of the same thing when you start talking about hypocrisy and morality, which a lot of people just kind of fall into the trap of doing. So I want to show you a video of a person who's a host or a guest on MSNBC show. Her name is Reverend Amelia Fulbright of Austin, Texas, and she claims to be a progressive clergy member who is in support of reproductive rights.
Personhood begins with birth, outside the pregnant person's body. And so I think that, first of all, that's key. You can't read the Bible and find anything that's against abortion. So it's an argument from absent thoughts in Scripture. But there are lots of times where Jesus takes people that have been marginalized because of their gender, because of their race or ethnicity, because they are poor, and he brings them into the center of the story, and he stands up to the political or religious authorities that want to control and oppress.
So this was done something around the end of the year, I believe, end of 2021, this interview. So she's saying a couple things here. Her interpretation of the Bible is that Jesus Christ would have been okay with abortions because it's not explicitly mentioned. Or he would have been, and because it's not explicitly mentioned, you're not a person until you're actually out of the womb. And that Jesus would have been fine with actually performing the abortion. This doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, and a lot of people won't buy it. She sounds like a person you don't want to, I wouldn't go to her church. I'll just tell you that. I wouldn't want to be anywhere around her, because she's saying that the woman has an absolutely right up until the moment of birth. And the vast number of people around the world, that's just not going to fly. And she wants to go much farther than Roe v. Wade would allow people to go. This is page 31 of Samuel Alito's draft opinion that I like to read. Ordered liberty sets limits and defines the boundary between competing interests. Roe and Casey, Each struck a particular balance between the interest of a woman who wants an abortion and the interest of what they term potential life. But the people of the various states may evaluate those interests differently. In some states, voters may believe that the abortion right should be more extensive than the right that Roe and Casey recognized. Voters in other states may wish to impose tight restrictions based on their belief that abortion destroys an unborn human being. Our nation's historical understanding of ordered liberty does not prevent the people's elected representatives from deciding how abortion should be regulated. So, Casey was decided something like 30 years ago in sort of a upheld Roe in part. The key passage here for abortion rights is you could have a state where you could in fact have abortion rights that are far more extensive than Casey. I don't know that it would hold up, but even until, as this clergy person, Amelia Fulbright, said, all the way up to the moment that the birth occurs. This isn't completely ignored by the media. The only thing they're focusing on is a possibility that abortion should be prohibited. So I looked up and I found this report on a website called Statista. I guess that's how you pronounce it. I'm not sure. And this graph, it may not be very clear, but at least you get an idea. This is 2017 abortions per capita per 1,000 women. District of Columbia is something like 30.2. New York State, New Jersey, 26.3, 25 Maryland, and then the fourth state is Florida. So when you look at the first 6 states, Georgia's sixth in this ranking, that abortions it's the 6th most common state, Florida being the 4th most common. So it's not true that the Republican-held legislators, those states have fewer abortions than the so-called blue states. California, for example, is at 16.4. The idea that many of these states will revert back to the situation prior to Roe versus Wade, in which 30 states outlawed abortion completely. For any reason, you cannot get abortion legally. You cannot perform an abortion legally, although the women were not typically ever prosecuted. Let's also take into account that many Republican voters are kind of agnostic about, they're probably fine with some rights to abortion. It's not true. I mean, you see this with politicians all the time. Rudy Giuliani was a pro-choice Republican candidate, and he didn't fare very well in his campaign, but there's been many Republican politicians, going back to George Bush, where there were exceptions to abortion. He was pro-life except for certain instances. And so it wasn't absolute that abortion was prohibited. It wouldn't be surprising in 5-10 years, if this Roe v. Wade is overturned, that the graph looks pretty much the way it does now. Although I understand even today in New York, they're talking about making abortion rights available to non-citizens out of state, and that they will pay for them. So if you want an abortion, you can go to New York and they'll pay for it. The government will, if they do what they say they're going to do. Many people just don't believe that their state or that their tax money ought to go to fund abortions. And why abortion right advocates don't respect this, I don't really understand. The citizens don't want abortion on demand. They don't want late-term abortions. The majority of people, I just don't believe, want that. They want parental consent. They want to be able to, they think that a parent ought to have the right to consent. They also think the waiting period is reasonable, that you just can't just go in and same day get an abortion. Countries in other parts of the world, particularly Europe, have more restrictions than some of the states such as New York, where abortion restrictions are much lower. It seems logical that most people are okay with states working this out on their own and without the federal government having a law that is universal throughout the country. You know, I've said Alito's logic on this is pretty unassailable. And as I said, Ruth Bader Ginsburg agreed with this assessment that the states and the courts in those states ought to work these things out. And there will be litigation on this no matter what in the future. But it seems reasonable that the majoritarian democracy would decide these things in the state by state basis. So that's my episode for today. I do want to go through, in the next episode, I will go through Alito's order in some detail, so I hope you'll watch that. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. You've been watching the Different Take podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, comment if you like the content, and check out the platforms that we're on. Thank you.